After the visit of Donald Trump's special representative Steve Vitkov to Moscow, negotiations to end the war in Ukraine have resumed. And now Trump's team is preparing for a trilateral meeting with Putin and Zelensky, while the president of Ukraine has announced a lot of calls to promote peace. Let's now try together to summarize all the information that is known at the moment. What is already known about the new wave of negotiations and the potential meeting of the three leaders: Trump, Putin and Zelensky. Let's gather all the information together so you don't have to scroll through tons of Telegram posts or watch a bunch of YouTube episodes. I'm gathering all the information. What is known about the results of the Vitkov-Putin meeting? What is known about Trump's plans to hold a joint summit with Zelensky and Putin? What is known about the issue of territorial concessions? And what is being said in the Kremlin about a possible meeting between Putin and Trump? Will the United States strengthen sanctions against the Russian Federation after the deadline? And will there be any progress toward peace after today's numerous phone conversations between Zelensky and European leaders? I will try to answer all these questions and more in this one big episode. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is August 7th. Now let's go through everything step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. So now step by step, let's start with Vitkov's visit to Moscow and the positive signals that supposedly came after this visit. On the eve of the expiring deadline that United States President Donald Trump gave the Kremlin to reach a peace agreement, as you can see, diplomatic activity in Ukraine has significantly increased. Yesterday, the special representative of the American president, Steve Vitkov, visited Moscow. There he held a meeting with the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Their negotiations lasted about 3 hours, but after they ended, neither Vitkov nor Putin made any public comments. According to Trump, it was Moscow that requested this meeting. However, on the eve of the negotiations, sources close to the Kremlin told Reuters and Bloomberg that Putin is unlikely to agree to significant concessions to Trump because he still believes he can capture 4 regions of Ukraine. According to journalists, the most he was willing to consider was a so-called air truce, meaning a temporary ceasefire and a halt to drone and missile attacks, to please Trump and avoid secondary tariffs and sanctions from the United States. Amid these reports, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reminded that Russia had already been offered an option for silence in the skies, but Moscow disrupted all of this. But despite the skepticism, the results of the negotiations received positive feedback from all participants yesterday. Dictator Putin's side described the conversation as constructive, and Trump called it more productive than expected. At the same time, after talking with Trump and European leaders, Zelensky did not rule out a possible change in Moscow's mood. According to him, quote, "It seems that Russia is now more inclined toward the ceasefire." Immediately after the talks between Putin and Vitkov at the Kremlin, the United States president had a phone conversation with Zelensky and several European leaders. It is now known that the negotiations with Trump also involved the United Kingdom Prime Minister Keir Starmer, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, United States Vice President John David Vance, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Special Representative Steve Vitkov. There is also information that the President of Finland, Alexander, participated. During this call, Trump announced his intention to meet with Putin as early as next week, and in the future to hold a trilateral summit with the leaders of the United States, Russia, and Ukraine. At the same time, the initiator of the upcoming meeting was actually the dictator Putin himself. However, he allegedly only suggested the general idea of talks in the future during his conversation with Vitkov, whereas Trump is only ready for them on the condition that they lead to a real end to the war in Ukraine. Later, the United States State Department commented, noting that a meeting between Trump and Putin would depend on progress toward peace in Ukraine. The agency did not rule out a phone conversation between Putin and Trump in the next few days and clarified that nothing concrete has been planned yet. Trump himself, speaking at the White House, stated that the path to peace in Ukraine is still a long one. But according to him, there is a good chance that a meeting with Zelensky and Putin will take place. At the same time, Trump pointed out that Vitkov's talks with Putin cannot be called a breakthrough. Meanwhile, sources in the White House report that Trump has urged his team to quickly prepare meetings with Putin and Zelensky. In particular, he is reportedly planning to meet with Putin in the coming days, then hold a meeting with Zelensky, and afterwards a trilateral meeting with the participation of Putin and Zelensky. The location has not yet been determined, but several options are being discussed, and today Putin stated that it could be the United Arab Emirates. The Kremlin claims that an agreement has allegedly been reached between Russia and the United States to hold a meeting between Putin and Trump in the coming days. According to Yuri Ushakov, an aide to the Russian dictator, the location for the meeting has been agreed upon. Ushakov also stated that the day before, Vitkov had spoken about the idea of a trilateral meeting between Putin, Trump and Zelensky, but Moscow left this without comment. At the same time, United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that after Vitkov's meeting with Putin in Moscow, it became clearer under what conditions Russia is ready to agree to end the war against Ukraine. He did not specify exactly what was being discussed, but noted that the key issue would be the occupied territories, particularly Crimea, and that any agreement will require concessions from both sides. Next, citator Rubio. It's difficult when you have a war and people have died. For example, on the Ukrainian side, they have paid a huge price in this war, so have the Russians, but the Ukrainians have paid a bigger price in this war. You know, these concessions are not easy, and they will still have to be sold to the people in your country. At the same time, Rubio emphasized that he cannot yet name a specific timeline for a ceasefire in Ukraine, but he stressed that at a certain stage in the negotiations, a ceasefire regime must be announced. Quote, "At some point a ceasefire must become part of this process because it's difficult to negotiate the details of a final peace agreement when you're shooting at each other. And what about increasing sanctions against Russia and its partners?" The White House still reserves the right to impose secondary sanctions against Russia's trading partners this Friday. Tomorrow, July 8, is the deadline for the Kremlin leader if Russia does not start real peace negotiations. Meanwhile, the United States State Department stated that Trump will make a decision on sanctions against Russia within the next 24 hours. Moreover, Trump himself, while speaking with journalists last night, suggested that the United States might impose secondary tariffs not only on India, but also on other countries, including China, that trade with Russians. But it's worth noting here that at first the American leader promised to impose a 100% tariff on buyers of Russian energy resources, but later changed his tone, stating that he never specified the percentage of possible restrictions. If you heard from Trump about a 100% tariff, you misheard. He says, "I never specified that. That's why they didn't impose 100% tariffs against India." But we'll talk about that now. At the same time, the Financial Times notes that among the possible steps being considered by Washington is imposing sanctions against Putin's shadow fleet, which transports oil bypassing the sanctions. Even if there isn't a large-scale sanctions strike on August 8, the first steps have already been taken. Almost immediately after the meeting between Vitkov and Putin ended, Trump fulfilled his previous promise and raised tariffs on Indian goods. In particular, the United States imposed an additional 25% tariff, which will double the total import tax on goods from India to 50%. But it should be added that the restrictions will take effect on August 27. Such actions are a direct signal to New Delhi, which continues to import large volumes of Russian oil. India is currently one of the largest consumers of Russian oil, with about a third of its imports coming from Russia. As Reuters reports, Indian refineries are already waiting for government instructions on purchasing Russian oil after the United States tariffs. If they are forced to reduce imports from Russia, they are expected to turn to suppliers from the Middle East, Africa, and America. At the same time, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that many calls and contacts are planned for today to make real progress toward peace and to ensure Ukraine's independence under any circumstances. Quote, "Several of my conversations are planned. A conversation with German Chancellor Merz is already on the schedule. We will also be in touch with colleagues from France and Italy. There will also be communication at the level of national security advisors. I have instructed to hold this special format today." Zelensky said that after yesterday's joint conversation with Trump and European leaders, he separately followed up. He also spoke with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte and the President of Finland, Alexander Stubb. I'm highlighting Stubb for a reason. Stubb is a very good friend of Donald Trump. They are truly friends on a personal level. So Stubb has influence on the American president. Then Zelensky says, quote, "It's important to discuss key details. The priorities are clear. First, Russia must agree to a ceasefire to stop the killing. Second, it's the format for the leaders." And the meeting could have worked towards a truly lasting peace. Then Zelensky once again reminded that finding real solutions can truly be effective specifically at the leaders' level. Therefore, according to him, it is necessary to decide on the timing for such a format and the range of issues. Another quote, "Third, this is the long-term nature of security. This is possible together with the United States and with Europe. Ukraine never wanted war and will work for peace as productively as possible. The main thing is that Russia, which started this war, actually takes steps to end its aggression. The world has leverage over the aggressor, and the world has the ability to verify the fulfillment of promises." Basically, that's all that can be said at this point about the negotiation process. We await further news. Well, in the meantime, I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I always try to cover the news as quickly as possible and analyze what's happening. So subscribe to the channel like this episode and click the bell so you get notifications about new episodes. I'll leave it at that. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.